Well, good morning, everybody. As Sam was talking about, I work for UBS Institutional Consulting. We've been consultants to Pioneer for over a decade. It might be 12 or 15 years, but what we do is we work with companies like Pioneer, also Nintendo, Costco, Adidas, names you may be familiar with. We work with retirement committees to make sure that every company's plan is top-notch. But the challenge is, and the reason for these kinds of training sessions, is that most of us were sick that day at school when they explained stocks and bonds and mutual funds, because the combination of having to save some money and invest it is easy enough to do if you know some basic concepts, but most people really appreciate knowing the basic concepts. So it's in that spirit that we provide these annual training sessions, but in between times, because inevitably people may have questions, the last part of this training session, and actually at the bottom of the first page here you can see, is the toll-free number to our help desk. We're in Seattle, but you've got people in the 360 and 509 area codes, etc. We're available at no charge to you because we're paid by Pioneer. So Frank's not here to sell you something this morning. I'm just here to help you understand enough so that you are more successful with all that you need to do. Save it, invest it, and then we'll even talk about how do you spend it. So our group consults to now over $20 billion of money, including yours. That tells you we're pretty good at what we do. And my role in the team is the retirement coach, because it's my job to put this into plain English. Even though it's being recorded, please don't let that dissuade you from asking questions, because whether it's this call or somebody listening to the recording in the future, chances are that if you had a question, somebody else was probably thinking the same thing. So with that, let's get started. We are also, by the way, subject to the rules of and laws of retirement plans, where even though I've been doing this 32 years and I'm a pretty smart guy, I'm not supposed to tell anybody specifically what to do, because I should know you to be able to do that. The reality is I'd be happy to leave you a trail of crumbs about what kind of savings and investment strategies are actually going to work. So the starting part is we need to talk about the money. So there's money, time, and rate of return. The money piece is what have you accumulated, what are you adding, what is Pioneer adding? We'll talk about that at some length. Time is how old are you, when can you afford to retire, and how long do you plan to live? And I'll mention here in a couple minutes, most people in their mid-60s are going to live 25 to 30 years, which is a lot of groceries and healthcare premiums. So the idea is we want to be able to accumulate enough and then make it last our lifetimes. So let's get back to the money, which is on top of whatever you've accumulated. And if you have just recently come to work at Pioneer, I'm a great believer in rolling over old retirement plan assets to your current company's plan once you are actually contributing, in this case to Pioneer. Putting all your money in one place just makes a lot of sense. It's easier to manage, and it takes just a couple of forms to do that, which either people in HR or your bookkeeper, Trotman Maher, can help you with.
Hey, really quick, Frank, because I just wouldn't want to double check our emails. This call is supposed to start at 9:45, so I just want to wait just a couple minutes. So people that are on the call already have some questions. It's just a couple minutes, but it actually was supposed to start at 9:45, and I would hate for people to jump on and feel like they missed something. So we'll just wait. Just I think it's literally 1 minute. And so if anybody has any questions that have been burning until we get started, that would be great. If not, if we could just hold on for 1 minute in case some people get on the call at the time that we originally had said it would start. So I was scrambling trying to find, because I felt like we had enough time to get up here. So and then the call was already going. So anyway.
Well, this is Vicki, and I have a question.
Please.
What I'd like to know is if we roll over another 401k investment into Pioneer's fund, what are the fees involved?
There are none. There are none on the receiving side, and Vicki, in literally about 99% of most plans today, there is no surrender charge. If you wanted to double check, the only place where there would be a charge would be where your money is right now, and only if it was in some kind of an insurance program, etc. There's relatively very few of those these days, but that would be the only place where there might be one. And by the way, it does take paperwork. Everybody wants a piece of paper in their file, so there would be a distribution or rollover form where the money sits today.
Right.
There's
right.
a receiving form that HR could, probably email you or fax you. And the receiving form actually tells you how to fill out the form where it sits. Because
I've done it. I've done that before, and I guess my question wasn't artfully worded. What are your fees for managing those funds? I mean.
Well, in essence, and Sam, do you know what are the total assets now in the plan?
I'm not exactly sure.
It's the Pioneer plan is, I'm going to ballpark at $50 or $60 million. One of the things we do with your retirement committee is every quarter review not only the performance and what's happened with the investments, but as the assets in the Pioneer plan, the funds actually go to lower cost alternatives. So over time, the fees get smaller and smaller and smaller. So unless you were in a mega-sized plan where you worked, a Boeing or a Costco, et cetera, chances are the Pioneer costs are going to be lower. It also begs the question of where you worked before. Was there a committee that actually paid attention to what was going on? Pioneer, as one of our clients, has been doing this for, well over a decade. So both in terms of low cost and quality investments, it's hard to do better. But I can't speak to Vicki, because I don't know where you work.
Well, I rolled my 401k over and actually just kept it at the same management company that my previous company was using, which is Fidelity. And, they have fees that I'm billed quarterly, and they're not cheap. So my thought was,
yes, and sad to say, my son worked at a company where they used Fidelity, and as soon as he stopped working there, they kept calling him up and saying, you could use the same funds in your IRA. I said, Michael, you could use the same funds, but because it's your IRA with $25,000, not $100 million, you're going to pay higher expenses for your IRA than you did on the very same funds at a lower cost with your prior company's plan. So I'm not going to throw stones because I live in a glass house, but that's a classic approach that Fidelity uses. And even if you were using the same investments, it's the size of your IRA in comparison to the size of the plan that you rolled out of. I could virtually guarantee you're going to pay less at Pioneer than on your individual IRA, assuming, Vicki, no offense, you've got less than $50 million.
Well, I wouldn't be here if I...
Well, amen, sister.
I probably wouldn't be on this call today.
Right.
We wouldn't be doing this right now.
That's exactly right. No, so if you're sitting in an IRA, if you wanted to send me your statement, I could go through it line item by line item. I'm 99% confident that you're going to pay less inside a bigger plan than you'd pay on an IRA. Does that make sense?
All right. Yeah. All right. We'll do that.
So now we're officially going to get started. For those of you that just joined us, thank you for joining us. There was a little confusion, so we got started like a couple minutes early, but just one or two slides, and then we realized that we had some eager beavers that were on the phone, so we have that's a good thing.
Yep.
So we're here with Frank with UBS, and he's going to go through this presentation. This is being recorded, so if you missed something, or if you're going to ask questions, feel free to ask questions, but just remember that it is being recorded so that people can hear it that aren't able to attend today. So I have Frank here. He's been doing this for several years with Pioneer, and he's a great presenter, so I guarantee nobody will fall asleep. And I guarantee you nobody will want to multitask, and they'll want to focus on the presentation. So anyways, without anything else, I'm going to turn it over to Frank, and he'll get started. Thanks, Frank.
Yeah, thank you, Sam. So again, as I was saying, our group consults to over $20 billion with a B, in addition to Pioneer's money, Costco, Nintendo, Adidas, et cetera. I've been doing this 32 years. It's my job to explain it in plain English. And so what I would ask is, as some of you may have just heard, is if you've got a question, is try to ask it along the way, because we're going to cover a fair amount of ground in the next 30 or so minutes. The toll-free number you see right above the UBS logo goes to our help desk, so that in between these annual training sessions, which are really designed to help you be more successful, understand a little more every time you get a chance to listen in, that breeds confidence and probably helps you make better decisions. Inevitably, questions may arise in between. That toll-free number gets you to our group in downtown Seattle. And the last slide of the presentation, which I just skipped to, not only in the upper right reminds you about our toll-free number, it does mention that we don't have access to your account. Once you're enrolled, you actually can go look at your information at 401save.com. That's where you would make changes to investments once you're in the plan. If you're not in the plan yet, an enrollment form is where you would tell the company how much you want to contribute, and in a minute I'm going to come back and revisit the matching contributions and the other monies that Pioneer gives you. That's also where, once you're enrolled, is where you would choose your investments. More on that in a few minutes. Once you're in the plan, you get a quarterly statement. That's pretty typical. But if you want to go look at things or make changes, investments you change online at 401save.com. Contributions are always changed with a piece of paper, which if you're in one of the satellite sites and you don't have access, you can call the people in human resources and they can probably email it to you. It's also on PioNet. So enrolling and changing contributions done with a piece of paper, investments done online. So let's get back to where we were, which is to talk about the different contribution levels. Now, everybody, by the way, can save up to, in calendar year 16, $18,000. For all of you youngsters, we 50 and olders have a $6,000 catch-up because a lot of us are behind schedule. So 50 and overs can do a total of $24,000. As you start to contribute some of your money, I'm going to show you in a minute that you get matched by Pioneer, but Pioneer actually gives you some contributions even if you do nothing. We hope you do, because as generous as Pioneer is to give you something without you doing anything, it's not going to be enough to get you to a retirement outcome that you'd like. And we'll explain how much of each of those there are. So Pioneer actually gives you 4.5%, as you can see, of what you earn. On every $1,000 gross you earn, an additional $45 goes into your retirement plan, split between two accounts, one of them called the pension, the other one the 403B base. The 403B also would receive your payroll contributions, whatever you decide to contribute, and depending on how much you contribute, Pioneer will actually match in the bucket. So in the big picture, two buckets, the pension bucket and the 403B, the Pioneer money will go into the pension and the 403B, your money goes into the 403B, and as Vicki was asking earlier, if you roll over other money, that also goes into the 403B but is not matched. It also, by the way, is identified so that on your statements or on the website, it always identifies where the dollars came from. Did it come from Pioneer on the pension or the 403B? Was it your contributions to the 403B? Was it a match? There'd be a further line item to track if you did a rollover. So as people come join Pioneer, a couple of years ago, Pioneer added, because the government said it was a good idea and actually blessed it, is that if people don't make a choice, they would be automatically enrolled at 3%. We'll show you what that would do in terms of qualifying for a match. But in essence, it's 3%. That's $30 per thousand. It's done on a pre-tax basis, so you're only going to give up part of that. Part of it was going to go to Uncle Sam in taxes. If you're auto-enrolled and you don't make a choice, you're going to be enrolled in the Janus Balanced Fund, which I'll describe in a few minutes. It's an okay place to be invested, but I'm going to encourage you, whether you are auto-enrolled or not, is to think about changing that to one of the 5 investment models. But we'll come back to that here in a few minutes. So if you are auto-enrolled, it starts at 3%, and then it increases automatically at 1% a year. So year 2, it goes from 3 to 4%, 4 to 5%. It finally gets capped at 10%. This is an automated process for people who don't make a choice. You can opt out of it if you prefer, or if you are already enrolled and want to add the auto increase, you can do that. Once again, that's something that you need to fill out a form, because remember I mentioned at the outset, anything that's going to affect your paycheck in terms of contributions is a form. Investment changes that once you're in are done with a online at 401save.com. The match is up to 6% of your contribution is matched two ways. It's double your money or 100% in the first 1%, 50% of the next 5%. The next slide, I have a table that makes that a little easier to see, so that if you notice in these 3 columns with the green heading are where Pioneer puts the money, your contribution is in the far left. So even if you do nothing, remember you're going to get 4.5% from Pioneer, 1% goes in the base contribution into the pension. This pension money is actually invested, managed by the retirement committee. The investment mix is about 70% in what I call offense or stocks to grow your money, 30% in defense, which is to add stability. You decide how to invest the money in the 403B, whether it's your money or the Pioneer contributions. And the last part of the presentation, we'll talk about how the investments work and which of the 5 models you want to choose. By the way, 95% of us end up with more money if we use an investment model. In this case, they're called model portfolios. There are about 12 different investment options that you could make your own mix, but relatively few of us know how to do that. But we'll come back to that. The point is, as you start to contribute some money here, if you notice in the left-hand column, as you do 1%, remember they double that, they give you 1%. As you add 2, 3, 4, 5, 6%, they match you 50 cents on the dollar. So if you want all the free money from Pioneer, if you do 6, you're going to get the full match of 3.5%, but the combined amounts from Pioneer actually represent 8%. Your 6 plus their 8 across these 3 columns gets you to 14%. Whether 14% between you and Pioneer is enough, we'll talk about in a couple minutes, but it's not to suggest that 6% is all you need. 6% is all that Pioneer can afford to match. Most of us would want to go past the 6%. You remember the auto increase function would take you eventually up to 10%. That would be from your contribution. Clearly that would qualify for all of the matching, etc. So anybody that's doing 10% of their money is getting 8% from Pioneer. That would give you a total of 18%. The question, of course, which we'll answer in a couple minutes is that going to be enough? Depends really on when you started saving, but we'll come back to that point. Your money is always your money. As we talked about in answering Vicky's question, if you roll over money, that's all your money. The Pioneer money becomes yours forever or vested to you in 2 ways. The 1% that goes into the base or pension contribution bucket vests to you over each of your anniversaries from when you were hired, assuming no break in service. So your second anniversary, you keep 20, third is 40, 60, and then 100%. The matching contributions from Pioneer are yours after 2 years. That information is included on both your quarterly statements as well as online, and it refers only to the money that Pioneer is giving you. Once you've been here 2 years, all of the matching contributions are yours. The base contributions, whether it's the pension or in the 403B, are on a 5-year. And again, all of this is included in every quarterly statement as well as the website. The base contribution, by the way, and the whether it's in the pension or the 403B, accrues to you after 1,000 hours. That's roughly 6 months worth of work. Your contributions you're eligible to do literally after 1 hour of service. So basically your first day at work, you're eligible to start contributing. So the first thing we want to do is designate how much of the money we were earning while we're going to work do we need to replace. The average is a little over 70% for most of us. So for every $1,000 you earn, we need a little bit over $700 in retirement to have the same lifestyle. The reason is while we're working, part of our money is going to pay into Social Security and into our retirement plan, as we've been describing. When you stop working, you're not saving for retirement, you're actually going to be using the resources you've accumulated, whether it's Social Security or your Pioneer plan. The next question, though, is how much do I need to save to get to that? And so this table shows us how much you need to save depends on when you started. So this table says, what about age 25, 35, or 45? And then in addition, when would you like to finish working or start retiring? Most of us still think about retiring at 65. Whether that's realistic depends on when you started. In the old days, I would have told most people, as an average, you need to save between 10 to 15%, and that's because from your 20s and into your 30s, if you want to retire in your mid-60s, that's the amount that we need to contribute on average each year. That includes the Pioneer contributions. So you remember, if you want all the Pioneer free money, you need to do 6% of yours to get their 8%. Your 6 and their 8 is 14%, which puts you squarely in this range. Well, guess what? Many of us didn't get started saving at those amounts in our 20s or 30s, so to the extent that we got started later, 14% sounds great based on your 6, but that's why that auto increase goes past 6% to as high as 10%, because many of us in America, not just at Pioneer, are behind schedule. And clearly, the more money you contribute, the better your retirement lifestyle is going to be. This is just a ballpark idea of how much we need. If you want to do more, you can go to the website where there are some retirement calculators where you can actually plug in your own information and get a projection that isn't just a generic, ballpark estimate. It would be a little more accurate in terms of how old you are, what you've accumulated, are you on track or behind schedule, etc. This slide shows us that adding a little extra. Some people say, well, Frank, does that auto increase of 1% more a year? And again, 1% more means you're increasing your contribution by $10 of your money per $1,000 gross. Saving that pre-tax, most of us pay 25% in taxes, means I only give up $7.50 of that $10. Otherwise, I was going to pay Uncle Sam $2.50. That goes into my plan. But on that 1%, this example shows John, who said, well, if the company's only going to match me 6, I guess that's all I should save. He only made 25 grand a year and never got a raise in his 30-year working career. Getting to 150 bucks is actually a pretty significant accomplishment. The good news is John married up. His wife, Sue, worked at the same place. She did the 6 to start with to make sure she got all the free money, the match. But she did the auto increase 1% a year until she got to 15%, or $10 per thousand of earnings, ends up doubling her money. And ultimately, I'm telling you, somebody making 25 grand a year and never gets a raise, even 150,000 is an accomplishment. Imagine how much nicer your lifestyle would be if you had 300 grand instead of 150. So the point is, even small increases in your contributions are going to add up. The auto increase function, that does it for you is simply a way to make that automatic, and that means it's likely to happen. Now, I want to spend a couple minutes on Social Security because most people in America don't understand it and make a horrible mistake by taking it early. This example uses people about my age, so anybody, I'm 63, anybody born before 1954 gets their full benefit at age 66. In this example, we're saying, what if that projected benefit was $1,000 a month? Now, almost everybody knows you could take it as early as 62, but you take significantly less. You notice it's 750 bucks, not 1,000. And if I take it early, and this is assuming that I'm not disabled or unemployed, if I'm still working, they withhold part of the Social Security benefit if I take it early and I'm still working. The reason that people take it early is they usually don't understand. Why would you lock in a lower amount for the rest of your life and forfeit a large part of the benefits in these first 4 years. If you wanted to take the benefit and work after your eligibility age, and in my case at 66, there is no penalty, but I want you to notice that from age 66 to age 70, each of these 4 years, 67, 68, 69, and 70, there is an 8% guaranteed increase. I've been in the money business for 32 years. I'm a smart guy. Because of my life choices, I was a single dad for 10 years. I married a single mom. I married up, but not for money. The fact is, I'll retire about age 67. We will spend our own money over these 2 or 3 years so I can actually get this extra 8% a year. The point being, your Social Security benefit maxes out at age 70. The reality is each year you delay, it's guaranteed to be worth more. So for most of us, waiting till we stop working makes a ton of sense, and especially not taking it early while we're working makes the most sense of all. Almost half the people in America take it at 62, locking in a lower amount. Most of those people are still working, which means they're going to forfeit most of it. So wait until you stop, or give us a call before you start, and we can explain to you how all of this works. The last thing I'll mention is, remember I mentioned people born 1954 or earlier get the benefit at age 66. You youngsters on the call that might have been born 1960 or later, you get your benefit at age 67. Whether it's age 66 or 67, those are increases from age 65. Part of the reason why people still think about retiring at 65 is Social Security benefits used to be eligible for the full benefit at age 65. That started in 1930s when, during the Great Depression, people weren't living very long and receiving benefits. By the time we got to the 1980s, people were living 10 or 12 years in retirement, and the system didn't have enough money. Congress fixed it by pushing back the eligibility age by 1 year or 2 years. They didn't take anything away from current retirees. They didn't change anything for people aged 45 and above because they didn't have any time. So Frank's opinion is they will fix it again because people are living now 25 to 30 years in retirement, not 10 or 12 years. And the good news is for the youngsters born 1960 or later is, in order to fix it for you, they're going to increase your eligibility age to 68 or 69. They may tax people that have a ton of money, but it won't take much to fix it again. That's important because it represents, for nearly half the population, everything they have in retirement, which means they've got $1,000, $1,200, $1,500 a month, and that's it, because they don't have a retirement plan like you do at Pioneer. For people that do have retirement plans, it's still almost half of what they get. So as much as we want to help you do the best you can with Pioneer and your retirement plan here and wherever else you might work if you go change jobs, what you do with your Social Security is going to have a huge impact on your retirement lifestyle. We just want you to get the message that waiting to take the benefit is usually a good idea. And if you're younger, if you've got parents or aunts or uncles or grandparents who are getting close, you might want to show them this slide, because this is going to be posted on PioNet along with the recording to give them an idea about why delaying might make some sense. So it's your choice. We just want to help you make a better choice. So when we spend the money, we can only spend, if we're going to live 25 or 30 years, between 4 or 5%. Or in one of the scariest periods ever, which was, believe it or not, in the 1970s, spending anything more than 5% meant you ran out of money while you were still alive. The Great Depression, the 1970s with high inflation were scary periods, so 4 or 5% means if you accumulated $100,000, you could spend $4,000 or $5,000 a year. That's $350 or $400 a month. And on top of maybe $1,000 or $1,200 a month of Social Security puts you at $1,500 or $1,600 or $1,700 a month. If that's not enough, chances are you need to work a year or two longer. But this is just to give you a ballpark idea of how much can you spend without running out. So Back to the big picture. The investment world, which is what most of us are scared about, especially post 2008 and 9, isn't so scary when you finally begin to understand it. And in this case, again, as I'll show you here in a couple slides, there's a series of about a dozen different individual investment choices called mutual funds. They're bundled in 5 easy-to-use models. If you didn't make a choice and you were auto-enrolled, you're in a balanced fund, and I'll explain the details on that. But what's underneath or inside of these different strategies are 2 basic choices. There's offense, which means you own something, and in the case of your retirement plan, you own pieces of stocks from all over the world, pieces of companies. I mentioned our clients, Costco, Nintendo, Adidas. They might be part of your strategy. You're spread out over well over 1,000 different companies. That will grow your money, although not in a straight line, as I'll show you in a minute or two. Defense, to add stability, is when you lend your money. Stable value represents short-term loans. Bonds represent 1 to 30-year loans. Typically, these would be loans to the government, corporations, what have you. But your mix of offense and defense is far and away the most important idea you need to understand, idea or concept, because that's how you'll decide which portfolio or investment model to use today or in the future as you get closer to spending it. To understand how these work, we show you, in this case, the last 65 years of investment history going back to 1950. And it starts with $1. $1, if you notice in the green box, had to grow to $10 to keep pace with inflation. So all of the groceries and housing and healthcare that we would have needed to use in 1950 and in the 2000s cost us $10 for what was costing us $1 before. So that's your break-even amount. Treasury bills are short-term loans to the government. They did a little better at 16. Bonds, which are longer-term loans to the government or corporations, did $50. Both of them better than 10, but nothing like the $1,100 from big companies, Apple, Microsoft, Boeing, Costco. Small companies did over $4,000 from $1, and these aren't a straight line, and this is only 65 years. The U.S. stock market goes back over 200 years. The trend, despite these occasional bumps, is going up and to the right because our economy grows almost every year because of something very powerful called population growth. More children are born and more people move to America than our parents and grandparents die. Every 10 years, we estimate that in the census, and in every 10-year period going back in history, except for the Civil War and World Wars, that number grows. If there's more people in America, most years, we spend more and the economy grows. Stocks go up in general. Real estate goes up in general. When we find is Americans, and actually human beings, when we're scared or nervous, we spend less and save more. So this last little dip here on the upper right is 2008 or 9. This is a 50%, 50 decline from 12,000 in the Dow to 6,000. We're now at near 18,000. In the early 2000s, we had the tech boom and bust and 9/11. Remember dot-com mania. And so whether it was 9/11 or the 2008-9 period or the 70s with OPEC oil embargo, gasoline goes from 25 cents to $1 a gallon overnight. When Americans are scared or nervous, we spend less and save more, even if there's more people in America, because we spend less, and typically we're spending less on big ticket items. Cars, trucks, big screen TVs, fridge and a freezer. If we don't need them, we don't buy them. So truck and auto sales cratered, went over a cliff in 2008 or 9. The last 3 or 4 years, we've had record auto sales because if you wanted one but didn't need it, you didn't buy it then, but eventually you're going to replace it. So this recession or short-term dip in the economy and in the stock market and real estate is eventually followed by a recovery because eventually people need a newer car or truck or fridge or freezer or big screen TV. The good news is when we're adding new money and Pioneer is adding new money for you, you're buying more of what you would have on sale During these time frames, when you get to retirement, it works against you instead of for you. So we're going to need a higher dose of defense as we get close to and start spending the money than when we're adding it. But this shows you that whenever you see a quarterly statement or you go online and see a dip, we know that history says, and the progress of people, more people in America each year is going to bring us a recovery. We just don't know when. So you want to include enough defense for stability to leave your money alone. And I'll show you in a minute how the models incorporate these ideas. This is a little different view that simply compresses the up periods of the last slide into the blue bars, the down periods in the red bars, and I want you to notice most of the time the market's going up. Occasionally it drops, but usually it's a relatively short in time and small in duration. 2008-9 was scary, but again, we've already recovered more than that. The thought that you might be able to get out and get back in and be better off is actually what I call the holy grail of investing. It sounds great, but it's almost impossible to do because getting out and getting back in during the red is almost impossible. The fact is that people that try to do that end up with less. Here's a 20-year period where the U.S. stock piece of your portfolio did almost 10% a year. The average investor cut that in half, not because they bought lousy funds or paid too much in expenses. It was operator error. Instead of owning some money in stocks for all 20 years, they owned money in stocks for only 3.5 years, and Murphy's Law would suggest, everything can go wrong, will go wrong is Murphy's Law. They didn't exactly pick the best 3.5 years. Now, investment pieces go up and down. This table shows you in some years it may be the best performer, in other years the worst. I simply want you to notice that the different colored boxes are all over the place with the exception of this black box, which is titled a diversified portfolio. It is much like the pension money, because remember, you've got the pension account and the 403B. The pension money is invested by your retirement committee in about a 2/3 offense, 1/3 defense mix like this black box. The moderate lifestyle portfolio is one of the 5 models you could choose that does something very similar. These strategies are almost exactly what the state of Washington does with guaranteed pension money for school teachers, firemen, policemen, managed by the state of Washington. The company Boeing, for whom you guys actually build and sell some parts, does the same thing. So if you want something that looks like this and looks like your pension money, you might consider using model portfolio number 3, and I'll show you in a minute what that looks like. But the reason why Boeing and the state of Washington and your retirement committee use it is it's never near the bottom of the pig pile. It's steady as she goes and ends up being a reasonable return with reduced risk because of the defense. The defense components are the yellow in cash, the bright blue in bonds, the light blue in global bonds, and in most years they're near the bottom because they give you a lower return. In 2008, when stocks got clobbered, notice who the top 3 are. So the reason why we use bonds and cash as defense, though they normally are near the bottom and a lower rate of return, is to add stability those occasional years when stocks get clobbered. You own some of each if you use the black box or diversified portfolio, which once again is pretty close to Model 3. Rebalancing is a way to also reduce your downside. It's included automatically with the models. And once again, I've mentioned it before, 95% of us do better with a model. The real question is which one's right for you. So in the bottom of this slide, we see the individual mutual funds selected by your committee with our help because they're all stars in the categories over here on the left. So defense, remember, are short-term loans, money market or cash, bonds or longer-term loans. Vanguard and Metropolitan West are the funds that actually invest in these categories. We have the offensive or stock funds, which are large, medium, and small U.S. and international, all bundled together. The balanced fund includes some of each. The models, which range from, for 20-somethings, 100% in offense in the aggressive model, diversified the way it should be across the 7 different equity funds, and including automatic rebalancing. It gets you the highest rate of return, but it's the one that bounces around the most. The one, remember, I was mentioning that's closest to how your pension account is invested by your retirement committee is Model 3. And if you notice, it's 69% in offense, 31% in defense. Model 2, which is right near a 50-50 mix, is stable enough that either in retirement while you're spending the money, and actually I normally suggest 2 or 3 years ahead of time. So for example, somebody retiring in 2010, which was right on the backside of the 50% off in 2008-9, if they were already in Model 2, their account value dropped, but so little that they were able to just retire as they thought they would. Somebody in Models 3 or 4 or 5 had enough in offense that they probably needed to work a couple more years to give it a chance to recover. So if 95% of us do better with a model, which one you choose is based on not only your age, but how much longer you're working. Because remember, Model 2 at nearly 50-50 is where we want to be 2 or 3 years before retirement. The assumption is you've got enough money accumulated and your Social Security benefit looks to be enough that in combination, that looks like enough. If it's not enough, you're probably going to work a couple of years longer. Those are the kinds of things that we can talk to you about offline, in essence, relative to what's going on in your life. I mentioned that the retirement plan website, which is 401save.com, also has, in addition to your account information, links to some retirement calculators where, once again, if you want to do this on your own, plug in how old are you? What have you accumulated? What are you adding? What is Pioneer adding? When do you think you can afford to retire? And finally, when do you plan to die? And again, keeping in mind that from our mid-60s, most guys are going to live into their mid-80s, most women into their early 90s, and that's on average. That's a lot of groceries and a lot of healthcare premiums to buy. So we need, between Social Security and our retirement, to have a healthy chunk of dough. So back to the big picture. The vast majority of us do better with a model. The question is which one's right for you? Your pension money and the retirement committee's strategy is close to Model 3 or the moderate model, much like the pension plans use. I included here the rates of return through the end of February. Believe it or not, as somebody in this morning's session said, he said, Frank, I got a quarterly statement last year that showed I was losing money, and I hadn't done that in a few years. I said, exactly. Your third quarter statement, which was the period ending the end of September, had the first 10% decline in U.S. stocks in 4 years. Now, those 10% declines, we had one in the third quarter, August and September. Market recovered by the holidays. We had another 10% off sale in January, February. That's what you see here. See in this 3-month and year-to-date column. And guess what? Here we are near the end of March, and your account value is already recovered. Those 10% dips in last year and the first couple months of this year, followed by a recovery, are thankfully there because that's where we buy more of what we need before it eventually recovers. How do you manage the risk of that happening either in retirement or shortly before is you get into something like Model 2, which has nearly half of your money in defense to stabilize your account. So even though it works against you to pull money out when prices are lower, a mix somewhere around 50-50 is where most of us will land. And again, UBS is not unique in that. Fidelity knows about it, Vanguard knows about it, Merrill Lynch knows about it. Managing money over your 25 or 30 years of spending is going to take something like model portfolio number 2, moderately conservative. So with that, let me pause and see what questions you have. Remember, you're being recorded, not because of anything we're doing, but because we're trying to make this available to other folks. So if you don't want to identify yourself, that's okay. So what questions do we have, gang? And remember, as you were all logging in, we were responding to a question about rolling over a prior company's plan assets. I'm a big fan of that. That as people change jobs, I suggest you roll your money over into your new company's plan once you've started contributing. And remember, you're eligible to start contributing your money, the first day you show up. The base contributions on the pension and 403B that Pioneer gives you accrue to you generally about 6 months later. But as soon as you start contributing, if I were you, I'd fill out those forms and get that money rolled over to your plan. If you need some help with that, we can help you. The people in HR can help you. The fact is it's a much better idea to consolidate your money than have buckets of money all over town. That's not diversification. That's just usually confusion and chaos. Any questions? Well, if you don't have questions today, our toll-free number is in the upper right-hand corner of this slide. If you lose track of it, you can always call the people in HR. We cannot see how your money is invested. So if you wanted to talk about that, maybe before you pick up the phone to call us, get a copy of one of your recent quarterly statements or go online at 401save.com and print something off. But again, there is no charge for you because we're paid by Pioneer. And ultimately, we are a resource for you that if you don't have a financial advisor you know and trust, we're hired in part by Pioneer not only to help the retirement committee, but to be a resource for you to help you save a little more, make some good choices about your Social Security so that in combination, you got enough to buy your groceries and pay for health care without going to work, which is something most of us aspire to because eventually you're going to be tired of working and having enough money is the right solution. So one last chance to ask a question.
Hi, this is Peggy.
Peggy, what's up?
Sure.
Peggy, did you have a question? Testing 1, 2, 3. Peggy, we can't hear you. Anything else, gang? In fact, Peggy, I hope you can hear me. If you can, this toll-free number. While I'm heading up the hill to the other plant myself, there's people at the office today or in the future I could take your call if you'd like, because you cut out after we heard your name.
Oh, thanks for responding. Yeah, we have a graduation approximately every 6 months.
Anything else, gang?
Interested. I just need to.
Otherwise, we hope this has been helpful for you. Don't be shy. Give us a call. Remember, if you've started working here recently and you've done nothing, you're going to be auto-enrolled. By the way, I didn't mention your Janus Balanced Fund. Let me go back a slide. The Janus Balanced Fund is actually in between models 2 or 3 for the reasons I was mentioning. I'm not recommending it, but since your pension money is in model 3, Boeing's and the state of Washington's are, Frank's personal opinion is this is a little better diversified. There's nothing wrong with Janus Balance, but if you wanted to take a couple minutes, moving into one of those models might be a good idea, and happy to talk with you about that offline if you choose. But ultimately, if you weren't paying attention, that auto enrollment and auto increase kicks in. You can always opt out, but it's really just to try and get you started off to your road to saving for retirement. So one last chance. If nothing else, for the good of the order, we appreciate your help and look forward to chatting next year, same time. Good luck.